Imagine a young Tiberius Julius Caesar growing up in a world where power and legacy were the ultimate currency. Born in 42 BC, Tiberius Claudius Nero was thrust into the swirling political chaos of the late Roman Republic from his very first breath. Tiberius's father, Tiberius Nero, was the quintessential Roman patrician on the outside, wealthy and esteemed. But when the doors closed, he transformed into an ancient Roman equivalent of a party animal, notorious for his philandering, extravagant celebrations and an insatiable thirst for both power and pleasure. Growing up under such influence, young Tiberius was exposed to a lifestyle that could put even the wildest of contemporary partygoers to shame. His father's days were consumed by wine, parties, and a ruthless ambition to climb the social hierarchy of Rome. On the flip side, Tiberius's mother Livia was a force to be reckoned with. Picture a Roman version of Cersei Lannister from Game of Thrones, navigating the political landscape with unparalleled cunning and ambition, all while setting new trends. Livia's determination saw her quickly abandon Nero for Emperor Augustus, Rome's most eligible bachelor, skillfully securing her position at the pinnacle of Roman society through whatever means necessary. Despite the chaotic influence of his parents, Tiberius adapted remarkably well to the rigorous demands of military life. He excelled in gathering honors and recognition, much like an enthusiast in history amasses rare collectibles. Tiberius became renowned for his proficiency in tactical warfare and strategic planning, standing out even while his peers were preoccupied with less noble pursuits. His diligence made him the quintessential overachiever among Rome's young aristocrats. However, beneath the surface of his military triumphs, Tiberius harbored profound insecurities and bitterness towards his family. His cousin Germanicus, a charismatic and beloved figure among the populace, cast a long shadow over Tiberius, leaving him feeling perpetually overshadowed and undervalued. In an act of defiance and perhaps self-preservation, Tiberius gradually withdrew, distancing himself from the political center of Rome. He embraced solitude on the fringes of the empire, stewing in his grievances and disillusionment. When Augustus passed away in 14 AD, Tiberius, almost by default, ascended to power, navigating the complex legacy of his family's scandals to become the reluctant successor. His rise to the pinnacle of Roman power marked a dramatic transformation from an overshadowed relative to the foremost authority in the empire. This transition signified not just a personal victory for Tiberius, but also the beginning of a new era filled with its own set of challenges and intrigues. His ascent to the throne was a testament to resilience in the face of familial adversity and a deep-seated desire to carve out his own legacy, distinct from the shadows that had loomed over him for so long. Upon ascending to power, Tiberius introduced a reign that can best be described as puritanical to the extreme. The vibrant and libertine lifestyle that Romans enjoyed, reminiscent of a never-ending spring break, was abruptly curtailed by what seemed like an overnight imposition of stringent moral regulations. Artistic and philosophical expressions, alongside even the most mundane pleasures like dice games, were suppressed with an enthusiasm that could rival the shutdown of Amsterdam's red light district under lockdown conditions. Tiberius's approach was akin to those historical anecdotes of figures who modestly covered classical nudes with fig leaves, except his actions were driven by a deep-seated compulsion to counterbalance his inner turmoil and insecurities. His governance not only threw the economy into disarray, but also ensured that the Roman social calendar was devoid of any festivities that he deemed inappropriate. Yet, the truly dramatic turn in this historical soap opera occurred when Tiberius decided to take an indefinite leave from his imperial duties, retreating to Capri and leaving Livia to manage the state affairs. This shift in power dynamics gave Livia free rein to impose her will directly from the throne, marking a period characterized by political intrigue, purges, and the consolidation of her own power, reminiscent of a particularly cutthroat political drama. In 17 CE, Tiberius sent Sejanus and his son Drusus to suppress a mutiny in the Pannonian Legion. Sejanus was, for Tiberius, the archetypal ambitious aide who, in his thirst for influence, ended up wielding an unsettling amount of control, almost akin to leading a cult. This man was intelligent, manipulative, and possessed a knack for ingratiating himself with Tiberius by alternating between flattery and subtle mockery when out of earshot, an impressive feat of duplicity. To the world, Sejanus portrayed the image of a capable and loyal administrator, perfectly able to manage the empire's affairs, while Tiberius indulged in retreats to his private sanctuary. Yet, beneath this facade lurked a scheming opportunist, ready to betray even his closest kin for a foothold in the corridors of power. Sejanus ingeniously cemented his position as Tiberius's right-hand man through relentless flattery and strategic politicking, earning himself a de facto license to extend his influence by rather nefarious means. His activities spanned the spectrum of political corruption, covert assassinations, document forgery, and manipulating legal systems to amass personal wealth and power, embodying the essence of unchecked Machiavellian ambition. Astonishingly, Tiberius, hindered by his own paranoia, aging, and emotional fragility, failed to recognize the monster he had empowered until the situation had spiraled out of control. Imagine the alarm bells that should have rung as Sejanus began overtaking roles and accumulating power, all while continuing to flatter Tiberius with assurances of loyalty and guardianship of his legacy. It was a scenario straight out of a political thriller set in ancient Rome. Meanwhile, Tiberius, likely preoccupied with his escapades and experiments in governance from afar, seemed indifferent to Sejanus's machinations on the mainland, so long as his own secluded haven remained undisturbed. But inevitably, as with any antagonist whose arrogance surpasses their dwindling scruples, Sejanus committed a critical error. He became recklessly careless. Rumors of his overreaching ambition and unauthorized consolidations of power began to reach the ears that mattered. Tiberius, ever the paranoid and perpetually dissatisfied ruler, was all ears from his retreat. Initially, Tiberius dismissed these whisperings, unable to conceive that his right-hand man, his counterpart in a twisted dynamic, could betray him. After all, Sejanus was his confidant, the dark reflection of his own troubled psyche. Betrayal seemed unthinkable, yet the evidence continued to accumulate, reaching a point where it could no longer be overlooked. Tiberius went into full-on retaliation mode. He sent back to Rome wildly paranoid communiques that painted Sejanus as the mastermind behind an elaborate scheme to overthrow the government. These accusations were veiled in secrecy, allowing Tiberius to orchestrate the downfall of his once-favored lieutenant while keeping his hands seemingly clean. The fallout was swift and merciless. Sejanus found himself suddenly isolated, his political support evaporated, his assets frozen, culminating in a dramatic finale. Summoned to the palace under pretenses of an official meeting, Sejanus was instead met by the Praetorian Guard and brutally executed in public, his rapid rise to power ending with equally swift violence. By the time Tiberius had harshly dealt with Sejanus, effectively serving him his comeuppance, Livia found herself amidst an escalating crisis. Imagine the desperate attempts Livia likely made to salvage what was left of her increasingly unstable son's composure, akin to a masterclass in psychological manipulation. She had been the voice in Tiberius's ear, soothingly speaking of legacy and duty, even as he visibly struggled with the weight of his role. Her efforts to maintain control were becoming increasingly frantic. In the toxic dance between a domineering mother and her deteriorating son turned emperor, there's a limit to how much manipulation can be tolerated. Post-Sejanus, Tiberius was visibly disintegrating, and not even Livia's most skilled manipulations could prevent the imperial family's precipitous decline. Livia, ever the schemer, didn't hesitate to engage in political maneuvering to regain some semblance of control. She initiated whisper campaigns, positioned her allies strategically, and perhaps dabbled in betrayal, determined not to succumb without a legendary struggle. But facing an opponent in her own son, whose perception of reality was increasingly distorted by paranoia and emotional regression, was an uphill battle. Debate continues over what ultimately led to Livia's demise. Was it the cumulative effect of navigating such treacherous familial waters? Some historians speculate she died of heartbreak, alienated and distanced by Tiberius, or perhaps she chose to withdraw upon realizing the irreversible extent of her son's detachment from reality. What's evident is that Livia met her end, striving to uphold her family's dynasty amidst her son's profound personal crisis. The notion of her dying, while lamenting the catastrophe her son had become, captures the essence of a dramatic historical saga. And yet, Tiberius's deep-seated issues didn't abate with Livia's passing. Haunted by unfounded suspicions, he even feared she might be staging her death as part of an elaborate plot against him, leading to the morbid post-mortem mistreatment of her body. This act stands as a stark testament to the extreme paranoia and dysfunction that plagued his reign, ranking high on the scale of historically notorious behavior. With Livia no longer in the equation, one might assume that Tiberius would seize the opportunity to indulge in his deepest hedonistic desires without restraint, right? Think again. He adopted an extreme form of isolation, withdrawing from public life to seclude himself in his island sanctuary, all while passing off the remnants of governance to a series of ambitious, power-thirsty sycophants. It seems the lesson from Sejanus's betrayal went entirely unheeded. Tiberius spent his days in Capri. The accounts from contemporary historians like Suetonius and Tacitus paint Tiberius as completely untethered from moral decency by the end. Suetonius writes of unnatural practices, where the emperor surrounded himself with seduced males and was initiated into secret affairs of incredible obscenity. He allegedly divided them into troops based on age and perversion to act out his darkest fantasies. Tacitus grimly states, "No crime was too foul if it allowed novelty to be imported into that jaded palace of outrages." Spiraling into paranoia, convinced of widespread conspiracies against him, his mood swung wildly from intense fear of assassination to bizarre, welcoming gestures, depending on the day. Truly, he embodied the epitome of chaotic rule. Despite his near-total abdication of responsibility, Tiberius maintained a grip of fear over the Roman elite, who, rather than confront him, chose to ignore his erratic behavior and focus on their own power plays, leaving him to his delusions. Caligula, the young nephew of Tiberius, who navigated the treacherous waters of Roman politics with a subtler approach than Sejanus. By echoing Tiberius's own paranoid tendencies and playing up to his eccentricities, Caligula ingratiated himself as the favored successor, avoiding the pitfalls of overt rebellion. Caligula's patience and cunning eventually paid off. After years of Tiberius's increasingly detached rule, the emperor passed away under ambiguous circumstances, leaving a power vacuum that Caligula was all too ready to fill. He wasted no time in asserting his claim as Tiberius's chosen successor, swiftly eliminating any opposition to his ascension in decidedly ruthless fashion. Thus began Caligula's reign, marked from the outset by extravagance and a level of debauchery that would cement his legacy as one of the most infamously despotic rulers in history. But that story is for another video.